woke up to hear a baby crying in my house. The problem was I don't have a baby, and I live alone. Sarah had always dreamed of having a home that was entirely hers. No roommates, no noisy neighbors, just the comfort and solitude of her own space. She had saved up for years and finally found what she thought was the perfect place, an old Victorian house on the outskirts of town. The house, despite being a little rundown, had charm. Its high ceilings, grand staircase, and antique windows seemed like a relic from a more elegant time. The price was shockingly low, but the agent assured her it was a steal, as the house had been abandoned for years and only needed some work to restore it to its former glory. The first few days in the house were idyllic. Sarah reveled in the quiet, the freedom to decorate as she liked, and the peace of being far from the bustle of city life. But that tranquility was shattered on the third night when Sarah was jolted awake by the sound of a baby crying. At first, she thought it was a neighbor's child, or perhaps her imagination playing tricks in the silence of the night. But the crying continued, louder, more insistent. She tried to ignore it, but as the days went by, the sound grew more frequent. It started at 3 a.m. every night, always the same deep, mournful cry. Desperate, Sarah checked the house every time it happened, convinced someone had broken in. She searched through the basement, the attic, and every room, but she found no signs of life. No baby, no intruder, just empty rooms. The cries didn't stop, though. Each night they grew more frantic, more desperate, as if begging for help. One evening, unable to bear it any longer, Sarah called the police. They arrived quickly and searched the house from top to bottom. But when they left, the house was eerily quiet again. The officers found nothing. The cries only returned once they were gone. Frustrated and terrified, Sarah knew she had to find the source. One night, driven by both fear and a strange sense of determination, she decided to confront whatever was haunting her. She followed the cries deep into the heart of the house, venturing into the shadowy, forgotten corners of the mansion. The sound seemed to grow louder as she ventured deeper, guiding her down a narrow corridor she had never noticed before. At the end of the hallway, hidden behind a heavy bookshelf, was a door she'd never seen. It looked old, its wood warped by years of neglect. The handle creaked as she turned it, and a cold gust of air rushed from within. She opened the door, revealing a small, dark attic filled with old furniture, broken picture frames, and dust. The crying was deafening now, but there was no baby to be seen. Instead, in the far corner, Sarah saw an old, cracked mirror. Its glass was streaked with grime and cobwebs, but as she stared into it, something caught her eye. The reflection wasn't of the dusty attic, it was of the nursery in her house, a room she had never dared to enter. The nursery in the reflection seemed untouched by time, as if it had been perfectly preserved. But the crib in the room was rocking slowly, back and forth, as if an invisible child were gently stirring within it. As Sarah stepped closer, her heart hammered in her chest. She watched as a shadow moved across the reflection of the room, a shadow that didn't belong there. It darted from one side of the room to the other, too fast, too fluid to be human. She turned to look behind her, but the attic was empty. She looked back at the mirror, and for one fleeting moment, the shadow seemed to reach out toward her. Then the crying stopped, replaced by a voice that sounded like it came from the very walls of the house. "Why did you leave me?" Sarah spun around, heart racing, but the attic was still and silent. The door slammed shut behind her, sending her into a panic. She stumbled backward, trying to flee, but then she heard it. The cry returned, louder than ever, echoing from the very mirror. She felt the oppressive weight of something unseen closing in on her. The air turned cold, and her breath hitched in her chest. Then, the reflection in the mirror changed. It showed her face, but it wasn't her. The face in the mirror was smiling, its smile widening in a twisted, grotesque way. It was as though the reflection was mocking her, reveling in her terror. Suddenly, the mirror shattered, and for a split second, Sarah saw her own face, her terrified, frozen expression, smiling back at her with an unnatural, sinister grin. I tried to run, but as I backed away, the mirror shattered, and for one brief moment, I saw my own face, smiling back at me.